Go
All
ahead.
right, he's Urban Meyer. I'm not, and the other guy in the screen is not is not Bob Knight. By the way, speaking of Bob Knight, I want to say condolences to the Knight family. And Urban, as we open the show, Best Fridays in Football, I know you knew of him and knew him. He was big figure everywhere, but particularly in your part of the country. And he was a controversial guy, but Bob Knight was one of the great coaches of all time, like him or not. What he did, Urban, undefeated one year, three national championships, even though his behavior at times, like all of ours, is questionable. What a great coach.
Yeah, I had him come speak to the Gators actually in 2000 and I don't know, probably nine, and he was great. We used to have something called Champions Day, and I would just invite either Super Bowl champions, basketball champions. Had some great speakers, Tony Dungy amongst many others, and he was phenomenal. He was a friend. He was a Ohio State Buckeye, played basketball there, and a legendary coach. So yeah, I always loved Coach Knight and had a lot of respect for him.
And by the way, a member of the sixth man of a very famous team at Ohio State too. By the way,
Oh yeah, and I believe national championship with Havlicek and
mm-hmm.
oh man, who's the other great
Well,
player?
yeah, there's a bunch of them on that team. We won't go into them now, but that was a 1960 team, a classic team, one that was always remembered in college basketball, and especially among Ohio State fans. Been a few years ago, Coach, so memories tend to fade a little bit, you know. Uh, Urban, if we can get you to step a microphone real close, I want to ask you some questions about coaches. I know your heart is with coaches. All of my life has been basically around coaches. I've known it for over 60 years. I've dealt with coaches and coaches at every level, from the lowest to the highest. And it's a different bunch. Anytime there's a question or comment or whatever, you come down on the side of coaches. That's who you are. Let's start with that right there because number one, today, as we remember Bob Knight and the other great coaches of that era and beyond, we think about the unfortunate thing that often great coaches are remembered for their worst moments. And Bob Knight did a heck of a lot more than kick a chair.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure who you're speaking of. Maybe some fans or some media people. I've never looked at it that way. The people I know in the world and profession certainly don't look at it that way. That you're remembered for something. No, I don't. I disagree with that. I think that's also the reality of the world we live in. But I never looked at a person. I don't care if they're a coach or not. I just look at some of the greatness that he's done, the impact he's made on the great game, what he stood for. You talked. I know many of the players that played for him. One in particular, Dan Dockich, and I know Bobby Knight, and he, academics were. It's a little bit like in that era of Woody
Mm-hmm.
Hayes and Bo
Mm-hmm.
Schembechler, and I love that era. I remember my first staff meeting with Earl Bruce and Woody Hayes was alive. He might have been there. I can't remember if he was there, and he talked about the culture and the values, and he said number one thing is premium placed on education. He threatened firing one of us coaches if our guys didn't graduate. And then he
Well,
talked about toughness, and then he talked about selflessness. And I'm thinking of Bob Knight. I know education was elite because he cared about those players. Was it for everybody? No. And I've
mm,
said that many, many
yeah.
times that a little bit like Steve Jobs handling Apple, that was not for everyone. We're gonna compete for national titles. You're expected to go to class. You're expected to do contribute to the basketball team, and if that doesn't fit your job description, there's other places to go. So I never looked at it that way, buddy. I
Mm-hmm.
looked at Bobby Knight as one of the greatest coaches in any sport of all time.
Agreed. A good friend of mine and kind of a college roommate of mine was a basketball official, six times called the Final Four. He and Bob Knight had their moments, but Bob Knight wrote him the best letter. He sent it to me last night about how he knew a game was going to be called right when he was there. He never worried about it. How much he appreciated him as a man, and he often had to stand up to Bob Knight. And Bob Knight asked him at the end a couple of years ago, "What would you done to me, Don, if I'd have thrown that chair?" He said, "Coach, I would have said, take that with you. You're going to need it where you're going."
Yeah, that was a memorable moment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that
Coach,
was it.
Coach, what's the major difference you think now? And you said that era, coaches now, what's the major sort of difference do you think with the coaches today and coaches of that era?
Well, I just told you the premium placed on education, toughness, and selflessness. It's just a different. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just much different. I talk to many of the people that recruit now, and many of the colleagues, and I know some of them very, very well. And it's just, I was talking to the head basketball coach at Kansas, Bill Self, and he said it's actually pretty good the way the recruiting works now. He says you don't have to get in those 3-4 year relationships with them. You just find out what it's going to take to get them to go to your school, and then you move on. And I just think, I've looked at college a little bit differently than pros, and I'm glad players are getting reimbursed or paid. But I also know that you have a long life after college. And the number one job of coach after winning is make sure those players are ready for life after college. And that's degree, experience, work experience, fiscal responsibility, all the things that we took very serious.
Kind of like speed dating today, Coach. you make a decision fast. How far does this go? I did dig up that roster, and it's worth mentioning. Jerry Lucas, who, by the way, memorized the New York City phone book, as a brilliant mind. John Havlicek, the great six man, of course, for the Celtics. Uh, Bob Knight. Let's see. James Allen, Don Furry, John Noble, Gary Milken. Anyway, the names were Lucas, Siegfried, Havlicek, Knoll, Hoyt, Knight, etc.
Sure.
Great coach there, and a great moment. Let me ask you about another coach that this week had a bit of a meltdown. You know him a little bit. I guess you call it a meltdown. Let's just say that he kind of went off at the media, which is not the first time a coach ever did that, by the way. And Dabo Swinney just got sick of it, and he just ripped into this young kid apparently. And said, "I'm not going to have you question me," and because I'm not going. He didn't respond to it. He told him he didn't put up with it. I think a lot of people silently cheered for him, not even silently, because they get. Now, let me just say this on behalf of my media brethren: you defend the coaches, I defend. I don't like to say media writers and legitimate people who follow the game and appreciate it. And I'll say this: the job is tougher than ever today as a media person, because people don't tell you anything. You're in the business to know, right? To know about them, and they don't tell you how do you write or say anything. Luckily, back in the day, I was fortunate to have people like Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier in my relationships. Relationships are different. They don't even have relationships, coach, for the most part. So I'm sure you can see both sides there. But give me your comments about Dabo.
Yeah, I just saw a real quick clip of it, and you're right. Media has changed just in my lifetime, and
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I'm doing this podcast is because I got so much respect for you. I
Thank you.
get asked to do all kinds of podcasts and interviews,
Yeah.
and I've reached a point in my life I do what I want to do when I want to do, and most importantly, with whom I want to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do a couple, but I don't do much because I've seen some of the stuff that's written and the shock jock reaction, and that's why you don't get that. And the other thing I'll say about Dabo is there's nowhere in your job description does it say you need to be a punching bag.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes I've had people tell me that, say, don't react, don't react, don't react. I'm like, wait a minute, what? You're also a human being. Someone takes a shot at you, you're allowed to swing back. Sure, swing really hard back. That's his prerogative, and once again, some people don't like it, and I think he made a good comment. If he reports to the board of trustees. I read that he reports to the board of trustees, the president, most importantly, his players.
Yeah.
If it comes a time, then move on, but not some guy that's going to call, and he's allowed to swing back. So I think everybody has a right to swing back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's difficult for them today. Let's go back to the guy that you grew up on. I read this today from Mark Wicker, who's formerly a columnist in L.A. and a guy who's very good and who knew all these guys stuff today. And people should not judge Woody Hayes for his worst moment, which is slugging a Clemson player on the sound. I was there that night, saw it. And it's unfortunate that so much of his good got wiped out for that because, for those who only look at Twitter, that's all they see. They don't see the great things he did and the education, the
Let me
stuff
let
he
me
pushed.
stop. Let me stop you there, buddy.
Yeah.
No one cares what people, the people that care are the people that he impacted.
Yeah.
So I just got to speak on behalf, and maybe there are
Please do. Yes.
maybe
Yes.
there are coaches out there that really care about that.
Mhm.
I don't know many. I don't. Woody Hayes, go talk to his former players, go talk to his former coaches, go talk to all the incredible things he's done. And like you said, someone can look up Google or Twitter or something, whatever that is. I can speak on behalf of many. So who cares? Go talk to, in my world, go talk to Joshua Perry if you want to, find out how it went, or, Nick Bosa, or, JT Barrett, et cetera, et cetera. Or go talk to some of the great, you want to find out about Woody Hayes, go ask Archie Griffin what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do. I don't really care about if someone writes a bad article, because
Well, on behalf, right.
I want to talk briefly about the Jim Harbaugh situation too, which
Okay, I want to get to that. Let me just get to read you
very
one
toxic
thing.
right now.
Yeah. Yes, it is. That's what it's getting to next. If I might educate Brenden, he's not been around as long as I have and gray hair. Here's what Mark Wicker wrote. Woody Hayes, who lost his spectacular career at Ohio State because he slugged the Clemson player Gator Bowl, had warned Bobby Knight about the enemy within. And Knight was fond of saying that an athlete's toughest opponent is, quote, human nature. It's a difficult lesson for children, no matter how old. That's what you're saying, basically. It's a hard lesson to learn. And so I know what you think of Coach Hayes and what he meant to you. In a few words, sum up, basically, who he was to you and what he represented to educate people like Brenden and his generation.
Woody Hayes or Bobby Knight?
Woody Hayes.
Yeah, Woody Hayes. I grew up in that era, and number one thing I learned is about rivalries. Is the respect, capital R respect, but also the hatred and the work. And I just remember, I don't know if he said it like this, but how do you respect a man? You work really hard to beat him. You don't talk about it. You just work really hard. So I carried that with me my entire coaching career. So, and also the premium placed on education. I grew up in the same household as a Woody Hayes type thing. My dad was very hard, I shouldn't say hard, very demanding. He demanded excellence from all of us. And number one was education. And so I just grew up with the same mentality that the most important thing you're going to get out of college is different now, because I see a very few getting just ridiculous amounts of money and generational money that can support their family, which is great. But reality is that you have to develop these people. That's what I learned from him, and I never want to condone what Woody Hayes did, because that was awful. But if you ask me and most that matter, that's not what he's remembered for.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then, Coach, let's talk about Jim Harbaugh. It's interesting. He was your rival. He's a very controversial guy. He's in trouble now. It seems like it gets worse all the time every time you read something. I don't know what happened. Educate us on what about him. And now I want to talk about cheating and stealing signals. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, I've been asked at least 50 times a day for comment on it. I've been staying away from it. I did with Tim May, who's my colleague up at Columbus, like you are from Gainesville. Mm-hmm. So I just shared a quick thought. And number one is that, I don't know, you have to wait to find out, and for me to comment and take a swing at someone, I'm not going to do that until I find out. That's not what I do. And even Fox Sports is very cautious about that, because the media is wrong a lot. Matter of fact, I'd say they're wrong more than they're right.
Yeah. And
so why would you ever take a swing at someone? Now, I will say this, if it's true, that's one of the most egregious things in my lifetime, and I do take offense when I hear someone say, well, everybody does it. Everybody does what? Yeah, they try to take signs, steal signs during a game. That's called gamesmanship. It's perfectly legal. If in fact there was a guy buying tickets and they were at games and filming it and taking it back, that to me, that changes the game. You're changing the outcome of the game. So, but am I saying he did it? I have no idea. I'm waiting to find out as well.
I would like to know, Brenden, I'm sure you would too, is that about cheating and how you as a coach deal with it if you suspect this going on, and how do you cheat? I mean, I understand stealing signals, but what are the things that coaches are most wary of? I always see Coach Spurrier started with the thing with the card in front of his face, when he's talking. How much are you aware of what people are on the other sideline are doing to you, and how do you combat it as a coach?
Yeah, we had 3 live signalers, and I was not as worried about it as our coordinators were, but that was their world. And I would hear them, we had 3 guys with different color shirts on, and you had the boards trying to cover it. And so I heard about it, but then I was kind of educated. Because we never spent much time trying to do it. We'd always have a GA. I would hear it upstairs, and he'd watch the other sideline and say, it's a pressure, it's a blitz. And then he's wrong half the time. So, eventually I told him, be quiet, don't, unless you know what you're seeing. Now, if the opposing team is that loose with their signals, that's on them. It's a little bit like I talked to some baseball players about that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like if you're really loose with your signals and the guy on second base can see your signals, that's on them. If you can steal the third baseman doing his signals, they're just loose with it. That's on them. But video technology and the equipment that go back, from what I understand, the Astros did. You're changing the outcome of a game, and that is the definition of cheating. You've changed the outcome of a game, and now with all the gambling and all the things that are involved, I can't imagine a more serious if you do it. But once again, it remains to be seen if they actually did do that.
Well, coaching baseball, we'd always change the sign. Like, here's your signal, here's the indicator. Game to game. Is that something that you all did?
Sure, you change the indicator and you change the person who's doing it. But I will say this: that it's not that easy. If you want to think about what a 17, 18-year-old kid has to do in front of 110,000 people on the road. And then you keep changing things, his mind might go back to the previous. So you like to keep the signals pretty consistent, and you just change the signaler, because you can't change. Someone said just change the signals, and obviously people that say that haven't been in it, because it's not that easy.
No.
Imagine you're the 18-year-old and you probably got, 70 to 150 signals you have to memorize. Wow. And then you change them. It's not that easy.
It's like passwords, Coach does. We have to change our passwords. We forget them.
Yeah. You're changing your password every week. Good luck.
He calls me, Coach. He calls me.
I call him, right. Let's talk about uniforms. Something you said to me years ago stuck with me. And I remembered my first uniform, what it was like to get in my first uniform. You said the first time, I believe this is what you said, you were able to touch the scarlet and gray of Ohio State. It brought tears to your eyes, right?
Yeah, I remember when I first saw that, I got down around there used to be a big track around the horseshoe, and I was down there. And I remember it was the first time someone showed me a jersey, but it's like a Gator fan growing up, and then also you finally have an opportunity. So I've always been a huge fan of the pageantry and just everything about sports and college sports. So that was a huge day when I was able to do that.
So when you take the uniform, the sacred colors of your orange and blue or scarlet and gray, whatever it is, and now you see what they're doing, toying with it. It's a whole fashion show now. We know that. Oregon changed it. I mean, if I want to read about fashion, I'll subscribe to Gentleman's Quarterly. But I mean, basically, they got 4 different colors in Oregon. It seems like they got 100 the combinations. Let's talk about black uniforms. All right. I've never ever been a fan of changing uniforms. I've never been a fan of black. But I will say this: it seems to have generated some enthusiasm for a few Florida players this week who need anything they can get this week to try to get past this game. So you weigh in on the black uniforms, Urban. You've never done it that I remember. And
we have.
Oh, you did do it in Ohio State?
Yeah, they did at Ohio State.
So
Okay.
Gene Smith and I are sitting in a meeting, and Nike presents these black uniforms, and he's sitting on the other side of the room. And I really don't care about uniforms. I let our captains and our leadership pick them. And we wore white uniforms, I remember, at Florida, and the white helmets. And I let the captains and the leaders decide that stuff. But I remember I kind of looked up and I saw this black uniform, and I looked over at Gene, and Gene kind of gave me that grin. And we said, the old Buckeyes are going to really hate us for this. Yeah. And I said, well, I love tradition. And I made this comment publicly. I mean, there's only one thing I really like better than tradition, and that's recruiting. Mm-hmm. And so if that's going to help you, it's amazing, buddy. That will help you get a recruit. Yeah. So all due respect to Buddy Martin and Brenden and the old Gators, I'm sure Billy Napier and Strickland, Mr. Strickland, are just saying, what's this mean for the product on the field? And if that you get a recruit because of that, wear a black uniform.
Yeah. Hey, don't put me in that. I love the black uniforms. I think they're awesome. So.
Well, you're right about that. I wrote my column. Never mind me, I'm old. But Scooby Williams, the linebacker, says ask on a scale of 1 to 10 what the black uniforms mean. 17, he said. So that's all you need to know right there.
They're the one doing it. That's great.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, for sure. So, all right. So we got some pretty good games this week. And now we're in November, Coach. Talk about November. That's when it all counts and it matters and the rivalries pop up. How do you coach differently starting November, Urban?
Well, it's like Lou Holtz used to always say, what kind of team do you have? Every time you ask a blanket question, he'd always fire right back at me and say, before I answer that question, tell me what kind of team you got. Remember, buddies, there's 3 types of teams. There's the overconfident, there's the underconfident, and then there's the team that's just about right. And if it's an overconfident team, you have to beat them down. You have to keep them, and I've had some teams like that where you have to really, keep pushing them down. Mm-hmm. You have teams that just lack confidence. What do you have to do to them? You have to lift them up. And then if you got that right team just the way you want it, then you have to somehow, and that's really actually as hard as anything, keep it that way. And that's why you have strength coach and trainers are so important, because they would help me with that more than our coaches. Our coaches are busy game planning, but Mickey Marotti would be my guy that 7 times a day I'd walk in and he knew there's 1 of 3 teams. Tell me where we're at. So November is about championships. November is about rings and rivalries. And you have to keep your players healthy, because right now they've played a lot of snaps. So you got to keep them healthy, but it's the focus and preparation now is, at a premium.
Brenden, coach is always good at refreshing his teams. Seemed like you always had somebody on your roster. Maybe they had gone awry early in the season. That was physically injured or whatever at that time, and you called them up when you needed them, and they came through for you at that time. It seems like maybe that psychology degree helped a lot, but it seemed like you had a little something extra at the end in the tank that certainly against Ohio State it did. So talk about that, refreshing and replenishing players as you did.
Well, I don't know if I call it, it's just development. You had David Nelson, who came out of nowhere, and Percy Harvin goes down. Who'd have think David Nelson would score 2 touchdowns in 2 of the biggest games in Florida football history? And it was just development. And it was also people grow up. Remember, you're still dealing with 17 to 21-year-olds. So that's a development part of their life. So, yeah, maybe you said refreshed or whatever. I like to say our position coach, strength coach, we saw it coming. And then bam, it was time. And Cardell Jones is a perfect example. David Nelson, that, just, man, out of the blue, here they come. And I'd put even Lewis Murphy in that category. Mm-hmm. Lewis Murphy was always a good player.
Yeah.
But boy, did he get good when we needed him. Yeah. And that's a little bit of who he is, though.
Yeah. Coach, I love Phil Jackson. I love that era of basketball. And he was always known to drop a book or do something. Is that the kind of psychology things you do when you have a very, very good and confident team? You have to get them to gel, not play as individuals, play as a unit. Do you ever do stuff like that just to kind of, get them out of their mindset or whatever?
Sure. Yeah, that was a big part of who we were. We always had a theme, and the theme was always dictated by what kind of team, what kind of leadership we had. And if it was a young team that needed rah all the time, then we did that. You're talking breaking chalkboards, you're talking to motivational speeches, you're talking about everything you could possibly use. Kobe Bryant was always one of my favorites to use, nonstop. Muhammad Ali was one I used many, many times. But then you have a team that is mature. It's all about preparation. Don't worry about that other stuff. It's because at the end of the day, the most prepared team will win that game. You have to believe that, or don't work at it. So the mature team was all about preparation. The immature team always about inspiration and motivation.
I know there's some coaches who are not above posting articles. I'm just saying anybody's name. I'm just saying about posting articles about how bad they're viewed by their opponent. I don't know. You would never do that, but that does work from time to time as well. Let's talk about this week's game for you. Crazy stuff going on right now. You're in Dallas. How good is Texas? it looks like the mantle is there for the taking. I wasn't surprised that Georgia was number 2. I think it's a soft number 2. Were you surprised who was number 1? The Longhorns.
No, they have the best. No, Ohio State was number 1.
Ohio State should be, yeah.
Yeah, they have the best resume in college football. 2 top 10 wins, 1 on the road. They went to Wisconsin and won, so they have the best resume right now. Georgia is, Georgia's as good as there is right now, so they're just going to face some really tough teams down the road. And the Wolverines right now are as good as anyone in the country, but they haven't played a third quarter, so they just played an extremely soft schedule. So I'm not surprised. But Texas, I had them as number 1 team in the country. The quarterback Quinn Ewers went down. They got beat by Oklahoma in a very close game. So I still think Texas could have a chance, but their quarterback's out. And the quarterback they're playing with now is, just young. He's not quite ready. So this is Kansas State. How about this statement? And I've studied it the last few weeks. I think 2 of the best coaches in the country, college football coaches, reside in the state of Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And Lance Leipold, the coach at Kansas,
What a
I've
win.
been the coach here at Kansas State. I'm telling you, Kansas State. And on Kansas State, I'm curious how many players actually got recruited by Texas? Probably none. Kansas, how many players were actually recruited by Oklahoma? Probably none. But that's how you evaluate a coach and the staff and leadership on a team. They won. They beat Oklahoma. And Oklahoma had, on paper, better players. This week, Texas has better players. They have 5 stars everywhere. But I'm telling you, watch this game close now. Kansas State is really, really good.
All right, final couple questions for you, Urban. Thanks for spending the time always on Best Fridays in Football. Always a good day for us. Let's get back to the Wolverines for a second. How tough is it for him to coach in a situation with so much hanging over his head right now? And how do you feel? Do you think he can give his best effort as coach with this situation? Every coach has some albatross to deal with at some point in time. Is this really a bigger one than he can handle?
It remains to be seen. I think it's a great question. As long as they keep, it's going to come to a head next week when they play Penn State. They're more talented than every team by far. Very talented team, great players, a well-coached team. But they go to State College next week, and then obviously, at the end of the month they play Ohio State. So that's a great question, and only one way to answer is you look at the scoreboard and watch the team play. But there's a lot going on there, and it's not just the scheme. There's a recruiting thing. There was a cyber crime
contract,
yeah,
deal.
There's a lot going on there right now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, one more time. Any job offers this week you may have read about? Because I know you get 10 a week.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm hired by Best Fridays of Football here.
Yeah.
Listen, and what will you pay you?
150 million a year.
You couldn't make it anywhere. What we pay you, we're going to double your salary next year, Coach.
Oh yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Coach, who motivates you? Like, I always wonder that about coaches. Who motivates you to motivate others? Right? Where do you find your inspiration?
Brenden, that's really a great question. That's I hate to say my motivation was fear. As I reflect back now, I was horrified of failing. And I don't know if that was the way I was raised, and I always feared letting people down. When I became consumed by Gator Nation and the former players, and the history, the Steve Spurrier story that was every day I lived that. And the weight of that became overwhelming. That I can't let, this we're going to lose this dynasty, I shouldn't say dynasty, but this great thing we had going.
It was a dynasty, Coach. It was a dynasty.
As opposed to enjoying it or living the moment, I was always like, what's next? What's next? We can't, what happened to this recruit? I'd lose my mind when we lost a recruit. When I was non-functional, we lost a game. And I wasn't as bad as Ohio State, but, I'm from the state of Ohio, and that you got your name on a program. And that's why we work so hard I hate to say it was fear of letting people down.
You mentioned Steve Spurrier. I just want to bring up the fact that Coach Spurrier now has talked to Freddie Wiebe, and I understand you've had conversations. So the reality of a chance to have an evening with Urban and Steve at Spurrier's Red Brown Grill looks closer and closer. I can't wait. It's going to be a fabulous night to get you guys to sit down and talk about what's it like to be the coach of Florida. Oh, you did that too. Oh, you hated losing too. It's going to be great, Coach.
I can't wait, and I love Coach Spurrier. we've become really good friends. And that restaurant now, that guy Reeby did it right.
Wow.
Was that a great
You
place?
did a
Awesome.
great job. Yeah, for sure. You can compare notes on restaurants. Urban, thanks very much for the time.
Thanks,
Have a good
Coach.
weekend show. Anything we should be looking for on Big Noon?
Yeah, we just our ratings are right there, and
Through the roof.
very
Killing it.
biased, but our team, man, I can't.
Awesome.
We're going to meet here in a minute. We have a ball together.
Thanks very much and appreciate it. Be watching this weekend, Coach. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Brenden.
Thanks, Coach. Well, as always, he doesn't disappoint.
No. How
Coach
lucky are
Meyer.
we to have a guy like that every Friday, like clockwork?
Yeah, and I love that because the rumor mill runs so hard, and the way social media is, and I have to watch it. And I see all these crazy stuff on Twitter where, because now Twitter is unregulated, of course. Anybody can make up accounts, and you can't verify them anymore.
I
and all
wrote
that
flat
stuff.
out that the deal was going to be done. He was going to.
Wrote it out. I saw one guy said, oh man, I just saw him walk into the restaurant. Just, it's great to get it from, the coaches, right there from the horse's mouth there. And every week we ask just because, and,
I'm almost embarrassed to ask. I'm almost embarrassed to ask him because it's such a ridiculous thing.
Yeah, but I think he looks forward to the, like you said, he doesn't talk to anybody else really. He rarely goes out and talks to other outlets, but he comes on here. I think it's an opportunity for him just to kind of, brush the slate clean. Just so everyone knows, if you're tuning in, we don't have any $100 million contracts to go to Michigan State. So,
And Urban is really great about educating us. I still learn from him, and I love it. He's a teacher at heart. The one thing that my friend Don Rutledge said about Bob Knight, he was a great teacher. Urban is a teacher. And I think that's the thing that people have as a takeaway. Looking forward to that evening in March. We'll tell you more about it. In April, we'll have both Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier in the room talking about life as a coach at Florida. Yeah. Brenden, you have a great weekend.
And, that's what I tell everybody out there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We don't get a chance to talk. We don't want to waste coach's time. If you like what you see on Best Fridays in Football, hit the subscribe button. We're on every Friday. Coach doesn't disappoint. He's on time every week by the second. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. You'll get that information. Also, head over to GatorbaitMedia.com where you get this guy over here. He writes a couple articles once in a while. He's pretty good at it. Buddy Martin, Franz Beard, all the greats. Right there. We have daily blogs, multiple blogs about information and things that we find out for you over there. If you're a Gator fan and a sports fan, it's just Urban talking about great journalism, talking about old school journalism in a sense. At Gatorbait, we take that into consideration, and we don't print or post if we're not sure. We make sure we have integrity with what we do, and that's at the mission at the core of what we are over there. So seriously, check us out at GatorbaitMedia.com. Join today, and you won't be bummed out about it. And you're gonna wear your black. I mean, by the way, how could you not like the black combo? I mean, it's our colors sometimes.
Yeah, I wore black last night. I'll be at the game on Saturday, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be an important game, as most of them are these days. Brenden, have a great weekend. Love you, son. Take care.
Talk to you soon. And thanks for tuning in.